Hello. I'm sorry for the short delay. Welcome to this webinar with Janice Johnson and the Peter Jones Foundation. Please click in the chat box, say hello, say where you're calling in from. We're so pleased that you could join us. So Igniting Enterprise is a webinar series presented by the Peter Jones Foundation. And we think that in this age of uncertainty, when the future of work is changing by the minute, we really hope that this webinar series will challenge attendees to expand the scope of their horizons. So the Peter Jones Foundation was set up in 2005 by businessman and star of Dragon's Den, Peter Jones, CBE. And our main ambition is to champion enterprise, business, and entrepreneurship. We believe that with the right mix of opportunity and support, every young person has the potential to achieve great things and the right to a brighter future. So we run courses, qualifications and competitions for young people from the age of 6 to 18 and have a vibrant alumni network of ambitious young entrepreneurs who are doing great things in business. And we're really delighted that so many could join us on this webinar today. So we're here with Janice Johnson, as I mentioned, and Janice spoke at EntFest 2019, which is our big festival of enterprise and entrepreneurship, to an absolutely packed amphitheatre, and it was one of the highlights of the day. So Janice is the ultimate multi-hyphenate. She's a storyteller, a founder. She's trained in patisserie. So she's an incredible woman. And she believes that everyone has the potential to do the work that they love, that fulfills them, that motivates them, that challenges them. And she wants us to kind of find the work that aligns with who we are and what we do. So we're really pleased to have her. She's going to talk a bit more about her business, Eating with Elephants, and the motivations that we can find to fulfill our ambitions, to realize our potential, and why limiting beliefs can help us stop realizing that anything is possible. So Janice, thank you so much, and over to you.
Hello, everybody. It's lovely to be here with you. So as Katie was saying, I'm Janice and I run an organization called Eating with Elephants. And our aim is to help to break stigma through storytelling. So the events that I run are either corporate workshops that help companies to create more empathy within their workforce, or I run storytelling dinners that anyone can come to, including you. And they're all about telling your story, hearing other people telling their story over a lovely meal whilst everybody's sitting at one table. So you can have that real feeling of belonging. And the idea is that in doing so, you're able to experience what life is like in other people's shoes and really know what it feels like for them in their story, which again is all about building empathy. So in terms of anything is possible, my aim today is to show you that it doesn't matter what limitations stand in your way. There's always an opportunity to be your best self, to use your motivation to create amazing things, and to have some perseverance that allows you to keep those things going, even in times of uncertainty like we're in at the moment. So the first thing I'm going to say is that there are several things that are really key to your success, whether that's as an entrepreneur, whether it's working in charities or working for somebody else. These are the things that really support you, whatever it is that you're doing. And the first one of those is mindset. And I know Katie's got a picture for me of mindset. So I hope you can all see this. So this is my brain, and the white patch that you can see at the top of that brain is my brain tumor, and it's quite big, which has meant that it has caused me lots of problems, including loss of movement in my left side, memory problems, inability to walk, lots of different physical things, and a few cognitive things as well. As you can imagine, that's quite difficult when you're running a business and, as Katie said, kind of doing lots of different things that either support people, whether it's training people up, or creative things like making cakes and patisserie for companies and for weddings. So why I'm showing you this is the fact that I live with a brain tumor is absolutely not something that I would want. It's absolutely not something that is in my control. But what is in my control is how I respond to that. And if I let that limit me, if I fall to pieces and completely catastrophize about having this condition, then I'll never get anywhere or do anything. So this is somewhere where your mindset really comes into play. If you can't change your situation, then changing your reaction to it, changing your response to it gives you a lot of control, and it gives you a lot of motivation to continue in whatever it is you want to do. So in my case, I still run my organization. I've had workarounds that have helped me to be able to do what it is that I do without having any limitations kind of standing in my way. And really the thing that keeps me going is knowing that the organization that I run really does help people. So I think what's really key with mindset, especially from an entrepreneurial point of view, is knowing why you do what you do, because things will be hard, especially if you're running a business, especially if you want to work for yourself. The hardest thing to do is to get started and to just do things. You might find yourself dreaming about things. You might find yourself thinking about what's possible, but unless you get up and do things, then nothing's going to happen. And that's all about building a mindset of positivity, of action and drive. And that's really what helps you to move forward. And the second thing that you'll need with that is support. So it's all well and good wanting to work for yourself. But as I said before, that's really hard. And you'll probably work much harder than you would do if you were working as a standard employed person for any other company. So you've got to provide yourself with a support system that helps you with that. And that support system really should come in two forms. So it's got to be all about you and making sure that you are well fed, that you are fit, that you are healthy, that you're doing whatever you can to support this body that keeps you in charge and keeps you driven and effective every day. And then the second part of that is having a team around you that can support you in your goals. And that could be absolutely anyone. It could be your family members. It could be a mentor that you have. It could be friends. It could be people that you have worked with or encountered during other projects that you've done. As long as you know those people and trust that when times get tough, you can turn to them and they can give you advice that you trust, or they can just give you the support that you need if you get to a point where you're wavering and you're not quite sure whether this is the right thing for you. Those people will remind you why you got into this in the first place. And without that support, it will be very, very difficult along the way. So I would highly recommend doing that. And the other thing is knowing what's possible. I believe that absolutely anything is possible if you have the right conditions to make it possible. So if we're thinking about that support, if we're thinking about that mindset, those are all very, very strong things to put you in a really good position. But you also have to know your industry. You have to know what it is that you're getting into. So a lot of that is about increasing your knowledge. And that's not just your knowledge of your subject. It's a knowledge of how your industry works. It's a knowledge of how the people who work in that industry strategize, how they make the best of the equipment that they have, how they make the best of the networks that they have. So really learning what the ecosystem around the business that you have is and how that works. And the point of that is really to support you in being able to get the best out of both yourself and the thing that you're working towards. And if you can do that, then you can get through pretty much anything. I think there has never been a better opportunity for you to do what you want to do. You can get onto the internet pretty quickly. You can build yourself a website without knowing how to code. You can register a company in minutes. You can get yourself a team very, very quickly. And you can communicate throughout the world in seconds. And that's something that people in generations before yours have not had the opportunity to do. So if you have all of these things at your disposal, it really is just up to you to make it happen. I genuinely believe that with the right mindset and with the right passion, at this particular time, when you have all those opportunities at your fingertips, you absolutely can succeed, and anything is as possible as you want it to be. So I won't talk at you too much because I'm sure you have lots of questions, and I want to use this session to be as useful and as helpful to you as possible. So let's get into some questions.
So we've got a question, thank you so much, Janice, from Tom Bainbridge, that in your opinion, in what stage of your life is the best to set up your own business?
That's an interesting question. I don't think there's a best time to set up your own business in terms of your life. I think if you look at people like Mark Zuckerberg, who started his business when he was at university, I mean, how much really do you know about life when you're, 19 or 20? Not that much, but you know enough to be able to start. And the most important thing is to start, because you can learn along the way. But if you don't start, then you're not going to get anywhere. And, there's lots and lots of people who at various different stages in their lives have also started a business. So you have a whole raft of people at the moment who are living a lot longer than they used to and are much healthier as well at that stage of their lives. So you have a lot of over 50s starting businesses at the moment, and they probably do have more experience than somebody at university, but then that doesn't really matter because the type of business that they're going to start is slightly different. So I would say it depends more on what you want to do than when the best time to start is.
Absolutely. And I think we are, as a Peter Jones Foundation, we champion young entrepreneurship. And we think that young people have everything it takes to get started in business, the drive, the determination, the resilience, the ambition. So I think it's taking those first steps, isn't it? And believing that you can do it.
Absolutely.
And we've got a question from Columbus Mays Harding, and it's really timely, this question. So how can I network from home? My work experience has been cancelled, and being in year 10, I don't have, a network of contacts. Any tips for getting into contact with industry professionals?
Yes. It's not actually as hard as you think. And I would say make the most of being connected on the internet because the opportunities are really there for you. One thing that you can use is LinkedIn. You can find almost anybody there and you can follow them. You can read up on their blog posts that they post on there, and you can always message them. Even if it's somebody that you don't know, you can send them a quick message and say, I read this that you had written and I really appreciated it, and ask them a very specific question. If you're contacting somebody, then you need to make sure that that person knows exactly what it is that you want as soon as they start reading that email. Because if they don't, then you're not going to get seen. They've probably got about 200 of those messages. So you need to be very quick, very succinct. In the first sentence, you need to know exactly what it is that you want from them so they can know what you want from them as well. I would also say there are lots of sites where you can meet other people, usually for social purposes, but actually they're really great for meeting people who either are at the same level as you, or trying to do the same thing as you, or maybe a little bit further ahead. I would recommend meetup.com as one of those places. There are lots of communities of people in professional with general interests on there who will have started a group, and they have events on there. Normally those events, a lot of those would be in-person events, but given what's happened now, those events are online. So it's very easy to meet people in those groups. Also, universities have groups now that are online. For example, Oxford University's Business School has events in-person events, that anyone can come to. And now they've moved all of that online, which means rather than having to go to Oxford, people can read up on things online and they can meet other entrepreneurs, etc. So I would recommend doing that. I think if you're younger and slightly apprehensive about doing those things, I would definitely recommend Twitter. And you can even just post, look, this is my project, this is what I'm doing. I would really like some interested people to get in touch. And 9 out of 10 times people do. Or you can just go on there, find people doing a similar thing to what you're doing. They might be leaders in that particular area, or they might just be people who are interested in it. Everyone has a bio, so you can look up the bios. And then if someone's doing the same as you or similar to you, just follow them and send them a message if you want to. So it can be quite easy. You just have to do a little bit of investigation.
And I will agree. And I say one of the great things about LinkedIn is that you can have a bit of a stalk and see people's career paths, and you can see that they're not linear. Lots of people have taken sort of different, gone down different streams than what they started off in originally, and that people build their careers very differently. So you don't need to necessarily follow one path. So Ruby has asked, what's been the hardest struggle of starting our own business? Which I think is a great question, and one that lots of young entrepreneurs want to know.
I think it depends on the type of business. So I run Eating with Elephants. I also have a cake design company. And I'd say the challenges to each of those is very different. So the challenges for Eating with Elephants when I first started was really getting the word out there and getting people to understand what it is that I was doing. There's nothing really like it out there, which is great because it makes it really unique. It helps to attract several different audiences rather than just being stuck in one. But it was also, exactly as I said, it was new and different, and people wouldn't know how to fit it into a particular box. So marketing it was quite difficult. I would say for my cake company, I didn't have that problem because everybody knows what a wedding cake is. Everybody knows what a corporate cake is. However, I think it's knowing what you can do, knowing what your capacity is and what your limitations are. And for that, it was not being able to do everything myself. It's quite a labor-intensive profession to be in. And so for me, the difficulty was the challenge of not being able to physically do everything myself and having to bring people on board who could do things for me.
So we've got a question from Nicola Horton. Are there any planning tools or methods you'd recommend to kind of keep on track? So what kind of steps we can take to make sure that we are realizing those ambitions and making progress?
Yes, there are. And one of them is going to sound really simple, but when you're at school and you have a school timetable and every day you know exactly what you're going to be doing and it's chunked, so you know you're going to have maths for 2 hours, you know you're going to have English for an hour, and you can see your whole week and know exactly what you're doing at any given time. I would 100% recommend that kind of time blocking for your adult life. It's the one thing that keeps you really on track. It also helps with your brain because it means you're not switching between different tasks all the time. You have a really good chunk of time that you're dedicating to one thing where you can really focus, and then you move on to something else that you can really focus on. And because you're chunking that way, it means that you can take really good breaks and look after yourself and not be staring at a screen all day. I would also recommend using just very simple things like tracking your costs, etc., you can just use a simple Excel spreadsheet for that. I'd also say that there are lots, if you're at the very beginning, there are lots of things that are online, lots of templates. You can literally just search for cost template and it will come up. So there are very easy things like that that you can do from a back office point of view. From a front facing point of view, I think marketing and design has never really been easier. There are sites like WordPress or Squarespace where you can just go on and within a few minutes use a template and you've got yourself a website. And really, anyone who's doing anything these days needs to have a website, because that's the first place people will go as soon as they hear who you are and what you do. So once you've got that, you're in really good stead. And from a branding perspective, you may or may not have heard of Canva, which again is something that lots of people use. It's really simple, literally drag and drop, and you can create very professional looking branding that you can use in any part of your business.
I'm also a massive Canva fan, and it's free for people to use. So it's great for social media. It's good for sort of having a kind of professional look and feel to anything that you're sending out. Now, William Adler Connor says, what inspired you to create Eating with Elephants? And Adiolu, who is one of our National Entrepreneur of the Year semi-finalists, also said that she really admired the concept of it. So what was the inspiration?
Well, firstly, thank you. The inspiration was a few different things. So I went through a really difficult time when I was living away from my family, away from my friends, really everybody that I knew. And I had moved for a job, which meant that really my life was kind of revolving around this job. And it wasn't very healthy for me at all. But I found that really difficult to talk about because it was really making me quite unwell. But I didn't have anyone around me and also didn't really want to worry people. But that meant that I didn't really talk about it. And it wasn't until I was really struggling with that I then kind of had to speak to my friends and family and just sort of be honest about how I was feeling. And it made me wonder why it's us to just have difficult conversations, to be really honest and uncomfortable, but in a really positive way, about things that we're feeling at any given point. And so I started researching what that looks like and what it leads to. And I realized that it leads to a lot of loneliness and isolation. And there are lots of different interventions for older people who are lonely or isolated, or children and young teenagers who are lonely and isolated. But there was nothing really for people from the sort of 20s to early 40s mark. And actually, when I looked at the research, that's the age group of people who are most susceptible to loneliness and isolation, because people think that they're okay. And they live these lives where they're completely open on social media, but about really positive things, and showing pictures of them living their best lives kind of on a beach somewhere, and not really showing what's really going on behind the scenes. So I spent 6 months researching loneliness and isolation, the causes of it, and people's experiences of it. And as I did that, I remembered what made it easier for me to have that conversation. And it was really speaking over food. And there's something about speaking across a dinner table, having the comfort of food there and that relaxed atmosphere that means that you're not kind of sitting one-to-one with someone, having a meeting almost. You're just enjoying a really calm, a really comforting experience. So I wanted to bring that into it. And yeah, just started shaping the idea around that and Eating with Elephants.
So Janice, you're an incredible storyteller. I think everyone here today can tell and know that. And storytelling is really important in business and getting a brand launched. So Adiolu says, there's some sense of vulnerability when you talk about your story, which allows people to connect with you. How can you achieve that same thing in business? So how can you bring that storytelling narrative to your brand to bring in that emotional connection?
I think that's a really good question. And I would also say personally, I think it's something that's incredibly important. And it goes back to knowing why you do what you do. If you are really clear on the reason why you do what you do, who it is that you're trying to attract, and what those people are interested in, you'll be able to talk to them in a language that they understand. And you'll also be able to be really authentic because it's something that you're personally passionate about. I think if you have those as a foundation and you're just open and honest about how you feel, then those people will be attracted to you and they will buy into what it is that you're saying because they understand you in the same way that you understand them. And I would also say, look back at what helped you to get into this in the first place. Look back at the seeds that were sown in your memory, kind of at the very beginning. What prompted you to get into this particular area? What's led you to even want to be an entrepreneur in the first place? And who's really helped you to do that? That's a really good beginning. And every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. So if you think about where you were at the beginning, why you were there, what you were trying to do, what led up to that, that's a really great place to start. And then in the middle, it's just about telling people what you're doing, keeping people involved in how things are developing for you. I think it's really tempting to stay behind the scenes, to just do your thing. And then once you've got a really lovely, perfected product, then go out to the world and say, look, I've got this thing. And that's actually really difficult because it means that your audience hasn't been with you along the way. They haven't seen the struggles you went through. They haven't seen your first iteration, which frankly was made of cardboard or whatever it is. What they want to see is that stuff. They want to see the behind the scenes. They want to see the struggle. They want to see how hard you've worked to get this thing into your life and out there into the world. And they also want to see the positives. When you show people the journey of how difficult it's been to get to where you are, when you have a success, those people are the first to cheer you on, to celebrate your success, and to really give you the motivation to get to the end. And the end is where you look back on what it is that you've tried to create. And that might be a single element of your business. But then look at it and learn from it. Look at everything that went well. Look at the things that didn't go well. Really sit down and take some time to properly think about that and to think about who did you along the way and make sure you thank those people. And those people will then continue to support you. I wouldn't encourage doing it for the sake of doing it. I think being authentic and doing things that genuinely mean something to you are really, really important, because the minute you start doing things just to make a bit of money or just to get people on board, that's when you're slipping into dodgy territory.
So I think that actually we can combine two really great questions nicely after that. And that's one from Tom Bainbridge, that I'm starting a project, but I feel I might suffer from burnout. Any suggestions for getting through it? And another question from Kira Coggins, which says, are there any mistakes you made with your business when you first started out that you wish you'd avoided? And I suspect that burnout and things that you wish you avoided maybe came together when you're sort of getting your businesses up and running at first as a side hustle and then moving it into sort of a full-time gig.
Yeah, I would say so. So going back to burnout, and sorry, what's the name of the person who asked the question? Tom. So I would say, Tom, that if you're at a point where you think that you're burning out, then you've probably passed the point where you're burning out. So you're already at the point where you need to seek help and support. And that might come in many forms. You might have a mentor that you can talk to. You might be able to talk to your parents. You might be able to get some coaching. It really depends. There's lots also online to support with burnout. But it's really important to look back and see what it is that caused that burnout in the first place. For a lot of people, it's working on things that they really don't believe in. And that will be a drag. If you're constantly trying to make something work when you don't believe in it, it will be very, very difficult for you. So it's really important to do something that actually motivates you to your core, that really is something you feel hugely passionate about, because then when the tough times hit, you'll see the reason why you're doing it and you'll keep going. But at the beginning, I spoke about support being one of your foundations, and it's huge. So really, you've got to start with, who are the people who are going to be there when I'm struggling to cope? Who are the people who are going to be there when I don't have energy, who can re-energize me? And if you've got that outlined at the beginning and you've contacted those people and told them what you're doing, and again, kind of shown them what's going on behind the scenes, they will have a really good idea of when you're working, when you're overworking, and when you're getting to the point of burning out. And they'll probably be able to see it before you can, to be honest. So they'll support you to get the help that you need. And in terms of what mistakes I've made loads of mistakes. And I think if you speak to any entrepreneur and they tell you they haven't made any mistakes, they're lying. So I think one of those is definitely overworking. When I first started my first business. And I think that's really easy to slip into because you're so passionate about it and you really want it to work. And there's just you at the beginning as well. So you kind of work all hours and don't really give yourself much time. And that's why I really want to emphasize how important it is that you have that support. And also advice that somebody who's years ahead of me in entrepreneurship gave me was not to do it on my own, to get a co-founder or to get a partner involved, because when things get really hard, you can split the kind of the difficulty, you can split the work between the two of you, which you can't do when you're working alone. And it can be really lonely being an entrepreneur when you're in a workforce and you've got, you know, an office full of people that are around you all the time. It's great. You've got people to talk to, you've got people to, you know, bounce ideas off. You can tell people how your day's going, and all of those things are actually important because they get what's going in your head out into the open. But when it's just you, you don't have an opportunity to do that. And so things go round and round in your mind. And that can lead to rumination. It can lead to you not taking action because you're kind of doubting yourself. So I would say really lean on the people who are around you, and get yourself a partner if
so we've got
possible.
A great question from Columbus Mace Harding. So there's a saying, work smarter, not harder. From your experience, is that true? And was it something that you regret not learning at a younger age?
It's definitely something that I regret not learning at a younger age. Entrepreneurship wasn't really an option when I was at school. It was never something that was talked about. It was never something that, you know, we were encouraged to do. It was only really something that I discovered a lot later in life. And I really wish that I'd had the opportunity to kind of take part with someone like, you know, the Peter Jones Foundation, or, you know, a lot of other organizations that are there specifically to support you with this and educate you on this at a very young age. I think it's absolutely fantastic. And knowing what's possible really does change how you can kind of picture your life. And I think because I wasn't able to, I didn't have that information. I wasn't able to picture what my life could look like other than sitting in an office and working with other people. And I think once you can see evidence of how the world works, you know, that someone can start a business, that there are all these organizations that, you know, they were started by people, you know, and those people began with an idea in their heads. And I think if you can see that, then you believe that you can do it yourself. So yeah, I would say that was definitely something I didn't have that I really wish I had. But it's also something that I've been able to give myself. One of the best things you could possibly do for yourself is read. There is so much information out there, and every time you pick up a book to read it, you've got another mentor. They might not know that they're your mentor, but you've got access to their brain, which is everything that they've put into that book. So I would highly recommend doing that and learning everything you can from those people. Sign up to their blogs, listen to their podcasts, read their books. That's where you're going to find your mentorship.
Brilliant. So question from Nick Dyson. And what is the best way to prepare for an idea to fail? Resilience is one thing, but do you have any practical advice for students or young people starting businesses? And I think fail fast is something that we hear a lot in kind of the world of entrepreneurship now. So how do you prepare yourself for it?
So I'm a big proponent of failing fast, but that comes with the caveat of fail fast and fail well. And so by saying that, I mean, learn from that failure. If you try things with the aim of like getting to the end, and if you fail, you fail, that's not helpful. There's got to be a second step, which is, once I've failed, what am I learning from that failure? What am I taking and putting into the next part of what I do, which is going to make it more successful because I've learned from the last time. So I think that's really how you plan from the beginning. So you know that there's a possibility that it might fail, but if you plan for how you're going to learn from any failures that you have, then when you get to the end, if you don't fail, fantastic. Think about what you did that meant you had success. But if you do fail, then you can think about why you didn't have success, and you can use that knowledge to put into the next thing that you do.
I think that's brilliant advice. And Peter Jones, CBE, our founder, he always says that there's no such thing as failure, only feedback. So it's the learnings that you take with it that are really important and help kind of set the foundations for what you're going to do next. So
Absolutely.
We've got a question from Andrea Robinson. Do you have plans to grow your business, and how do you plan to do that? And I think what essentially is your long-term vision for Eating with Elephants?
That's a great question, Andrea. So my business has come into some challenges because it's an in-person event, and it's not an in-person event because it happens to be one. It's specifically designed to create a feeling. It's designed to create an experience of being around other people, and that kind of sense of sitting around a campfire and telling stories that you only get when you have people in the room. And so I've always been very hesitant about taking that in any other direction, because those particular elements are so important to the events working well. And then something like COVID-19 comes into play, and actually you can't meet anymore. And so what's been really important for me is finding a way to make this organization work, and finding a way to give the people who are being supported and being helped by it another way of continuing to get that help without being able to go and see each other in person. So after my initial hesitation, I've now taken it online. And I think what's really important is, again, your mindset, like not letting these things become a barrier. So if you say to, anyone, you have an in-person events business, and unfortunately you're not allowed to have in-person events anymore, that's going to be really scary. That's going to be you thinking, how am I going to make money now? And how am I going to help the people who trust me and rely on me to get the help that they need? And then how am I going to support people who actually just really love the experience of being at these events? So you've got three different problems which immediately come to mind. And what you could do is just completely be crippled by that fear. And you could just say to yourself, well, that's it. This isn't going to work. I don't know what I'm going to do next. I might have to wait it out and wait until this whole episode is over, which nobody knows. It could be months and months. Or I might just forget the whole thing because this doesn't work anymore. And that's the end. And I'm really scared and I just can't face it. That's one way you could deal with it. Or you can have more of a growth mindset, which is all about seeing the problem and looking at ways that you can get around it. And I think with something like this, the response has been thinking about what are the special things that I want people to get out of these events. And by doing that, it's looking at your business as objectively as possible, kind of taking your head off and putting the heads of your customers on. And so you look through their eyes and think, what do they enjoy about this experience? What are they getting out of it? And how can I take those things and support them with those things? And if you ask the question that way, it's not saying, how can I change my event? It's saying, this is what people get out of my events. They get the connection, they get the support, they get the empathy. How can I create something that gives people support, that gives people connection, that gives them empathy? And you might end up with something that is completely different to what you were doing before, but it doesn't matter, because what you're doing is you're supporting the very people that you were supporting in the first place. So in my case, thinking about the things that people liked, one of those things was quiet and calm and an opportunity to be listened to. The other thing was having connection with other people. And the third thing was having that really tactile experience where you've got food. It's all done by candlelight when it's in person. So kind of having that campfire atmosphere. And so those are all things that actually really stood out for me as being very simple things that people really appreciate about this event. And so those are my guiding lights. Those are the things that I have to use to create a different product that they can access at home. And that's eventually turned into kits that get sent out. So I still run events. I run them online. But they're not like your normal kind of Zoom meeting. There's a lot of silence. It's the same number of people that you have at the in-person events. Everybody gets to tell a story in exactly the same way. And to make it less of an experience where you just stare at a screen, all those tangible elements that people love kind of come in these kits that arrive at their home, that have candles in them, that have a cocktail in them, which is what they would normally have at an event, that has food in it so that everybody's sharing the same meal, that has all the kind of letter writing kit that they would have at an event. So instead of just staring at a screen, they've got physical, tangible things that they can use in exactly the same way as they would if they were at an event. And those are the things that people really love about it. So I think if you just turn your mind to the specifics of what your audience wants, you can create a product that works for them.
Brilliant. And we've got a question from Louise Doherty. So do you have someone that inspired you? So was it someone who gave you the idea, or is there a kind of a figure in your life who inspired you to kind of go into business and that you could set this up yourself? Or was it from within that you had that self-belief, you imagined it and you made it happen?
So Louise, I don't have a particular person, no. I would say I definitely have an army of mentors in those books that I have read and continue to read. So I started out doing cakes in a very different way to what I do now. But part of that was knowing that I was really good at it because it was something that I didn't do for money. I just used to make cakes for people, whether at work or friends and family, and they commented all the time on how good they were. And I think if you're doing something just kind of as and when, kind of a hobby thing that people constantly say is really good and that you should pursue, I think you should listen to them. It might not necessarily be something you want to do. So it might not be that you'll do exactly as they say, but the fact that they're telling you that there is value in what you have to offer is a really good indication of where you excel. It's a really good indication of where your skills lie. And so that is information that you can use to create a path for yourself that you love. So yeah, I would say there's not a particular person for me, and there wasn't a particular person that sparked the idea for Eating with Elephants either. It was more based on my experience and the people that I spoke to.
And I think that everyone can chase a lot of value in their own experience and their intuition, and they know, if they have the self-belief that they can make it happen. I think limiting beliefs are often the things that hold us back rather than external factors.
Absolutely. And I would say on that as well, shame is a big thing that stops people from being successful with their businesses or even starting them in the first place. And that's because there is so much failure when you start a business. And that failure is not a bad thing at all, because as we've just said, you can learn from it. But there are so many people who feel so embarrassed and so ashamed of having failed that they then give up completely. So I would say use yourself as motivation, use yourself as inspiration, and know that however hard things are, you've got up to this point, and if you can get up to this point, then you can get to the next point. And as long as you have really manageable goals for yourself, there's absolutely no need to be ashamed at all. And you can definitely be your own inspiration.
I agree. So from Lorna McNeil, what was the best learning experience so far in life or in business? And did this make you change your outlook approach to your work-life balance?
Good question. I guess twofold. One experience wasn't good, but it led me to amazing things. So as I was talking about before, I didn't really enjoy living very far away from everybody I knew and focusing all my time on work and really doing a job that was fine. It was decent money. It was keeping the cogs turning, but really I didn't love it in any way, shape or form. And so that really depleted my energy, because the thing is, if you're spending all of your energy trying to do a job that you don't like, then that's a lot of wasted energy that could be put into doing something you do like. And you would probably have twice as much energy doing that because you're not spending it trying to get through the day that you hate so much. So that was really good learning for me, that actually, if you don't want to do something, it's okay to stop. And it's okay to think about what you do like and move towards that instead. So I was very fortunate in my organization. You can take sabbaticals. So I took a sabbatical, which was like an 8-month break from work. And yeah, I was really fortunate because I was still getting paid, but I could go out and I could do whatever I wanted to do. So I knew that I really liked patisserie. I knew that I wanted to kind of improve my skills for my business. And so I went and lived in Paris for that time, and I literally worked for free. I just went into patisseries and I said, I want to do this. Can you teach me? And you'd be surprised how many people say yes to you if you just ask the question. It seems really impossible and you think, oh my God, they're going to judge me, but actually they won't. A lot of people will have a lot of respect for you because you're willing to work for free to learn a trade. And other people, might not even think about it, but they'll give you the job because they need you. A lot of people need things done, so volunteer for it and you'll get there.
I think that's a great question. And this is from Chris. So at what point did you realize there was a market for your business? In essence, when was the moment as turning point that you knew it had longevity?
So I would say I did a lot of research. So 6 months researching, and probably more than that before I started a formal research project. That showed me the problem that people have. And I think if you think about your business as a solution to a problem, then you're on the right track. But you don't start with the solution. You start with the problem and then you work from there. So I knew that there was a lot of loneliness and isolation in London. I knew that it was officially classed as the loneliest city in the world. I knew that there was this demographic of people who weren't being supported, and that what I was creating was something that would allow those people in particular to be supported. So I guess the turning point was taking all of that research and putting it into something that was real, something that was out there in the world that people could kind of use and take part in. And I think when you first do that, it's scary because it's a test. You don't know whether people are going to respond to it well. You don't know if it's actually going to be that helpful to them. You kind of doubt whether it will be successful in all those different ways. But that's why it's really important to just go for it, just start, and then you can take the next step after that. And when I started, it looked completely different to what it looks like today, but I'm really glad that I did start because that was a real turning point for me after I had my first couple of events and I knew that it had gone well and I had the kind of feedback that, you know, I couldn't possibly have dreamt of. And then I thought, okay, this is great. This is actually something that's helping people. They're really getting a benefit from it. I'm going to keep doing this and I'm going to keep iterating based on what people want. And that's kind of how it's got to where it is now.
Brilliant. And I think we have just a couple more questions. So I really like this one from Scott Laidlaw. He said, what advice would you give to someone who has lots of ideas but doesn't know which one to go with? You know, how do you know to do the best market research in the situation we're in now? You know, how can you see which idea is going to make the most sense, be the most profitable, have the most longevity?
Mm-hmm. I think there are several ways of doing that, but I would recommend literally you can create a chart. So you put all of your ideas down one side, so on the left, and then at the top, you put all your criteria for starting that business. So that might mean the startup costs that it's going to have, your interest in it, what you want to get out of it, who are the people that you're trying to attract, who are the people that can help you with it, who can support you with it, and just keep going and going until you have all of your criteria. And then you can literally map against that what each idea is going to give you and how successful each idea is going to be based on how many of those criteria it meets. That's really helpful from a very kind of practical point of view, but you might get a couple of different answers from that are all the same in terms of possibility. And so I would say you could take those, let's say it's 3 ideas that come out of a list of 12, take those 3 and really look at which of the ones that you've got on that piece of paper do you feel hugely passionate about? Which of those are you more excited to do than the other? And rank them. You know, if you force yourself to put them from 1 to 3 in order of importance to you, then you'll get to a point where you know the one that you should go for. I'd also recommend if that's not enough and you still get to a point where you've got a tie, I would recommend thinking about something called blue ocean strategy. And it's basically all about an idea that in business, we're all, any company, any entrepreneur, we're all sharks in a big sea of water. And you've got areas of that water where you have kind of each shark kind of biting at the next shark. So an industry where that would be happening is office space. So you would have before, I would say about 5 years ago, you would have people who would rent you an office space. You'd have to take a contract out for years at a time. You'd be stuck into it. You wouldn't have very many amenities. You'd have to buy all of your kit yourself. You'd have to buy all the kind of power yourself, the electricity, all of your overheads would be down to you. The offices weren't in particularly helpful places, et cetera, et cetera. However, there were a few of those different companies and they were all doing the same thing, which means they're all trying to get a piece of the pie. And therefore, that's where the water's really bloody because they're kind of taking bites out of each other all the time. In the blue ocean that doesn't have the blood in it is someone like WeWork or WorkLife, who don't really have to fight with them because they've come up with a completely different model where they don't own their offices, they don't own the land, they rent them and then they rent the space to you. They provide everything down to biscuits and coffee, literally everything that you could think of that you need in an office, and it's all based on a membership that you can cancel at any time. So all the restrictions that you had with all of the standard office businesses are suddenly not there anymore. And these people just have a really lovely blue ocean that they can swim in and get as far as they want to because they don't have to fight all of these other sharks. So if you take your ideas and think which one of these has the biggest potential to be swimming in blue ocean water, then that's the one that you should go for, I think.
So we're just coming towards the end of the webinar, but we've got one more question from Columbus Mays Harding. And They say a great piece of advice I've been given is invest from as young an age as possible. Invest in stocks, invest in knowledge, invest in yourself. If you were in my shoes, still studying in school, how would you use your teenage years to best prepare yourself for the future?
Sorry,
if you were in my
repeat the
shoes,
question.
So still studying at school, how would you use your teenage years to best prepare yourself for the future?
That's such an interesting question. I would say do everything in your power as you have been taught to do. So about the timetabling, that's something that you were taught when you were 10 years old, and you can keep those things. So whatever was useful to you during your school time, and look at that objectively. Don't look at what you liked and what you didn't like. Look at what was actually useful to you and what wasn't useful to you. Take those things and add them to a list of, these are the things that are going to support me when I become an entrepreneur. I would also say, in terms of your mindset, think about what you want at the end. Think about the goal that you're aiming towards, and, think completely pie in the sky. Don't let anything be limiting to you. Think, if you had anything in the world, if you had all the tools at your disposal, if you had all the money that is possible, what would you do? What would it look like? And be really kind of tangible about that. Write it down, draw it, whatever you have to do, make it visible and keep it somewhere that you can see what it is that you're trying to achieve. And what it means is you've got an image in your mind of why you're looking forward to this at the end of your kind of college years, or your university years, wherever it is that you're going to end up. You've got this thing that, if you have it in your mind, there are lots of different threads that will start to come together. You'll start to see how the choices that you make link up to that eventual goal. You'll start to see how the media that you consume is going to lead up to that goal. You'll start to see how the relationships that you build will lead up to that goal. So I would say definitely keep that image as tangible as possible in mind. Keep it as visible as possible. And in terms of what you can do as a teenager at that particular time, I would say talk to people about what you want to do. If you have conversations with people, you don't know who those people might be connected to. You don't know, what they might be able to offer you. So always have your elevator pitch ready. And your elevator pitch is essentially something I'm sure that, Peter Jones Foundation have let you know about. It's just a 30-second or 1 minute spiel about what it is that you want to do, or what it is that you're already doing if you have a business. And it's saying, this is what I do, this is how I do it, this is when I do it, and this is who I do it for. Really simple. And you can say that in a couple of sentences that mean that by the time you get to the 5th floor in an elevator, you've already explained to someone who could possibly give you a lot of money for it or be able to offer you a lot of support. And if you're always ready with that, I think you get opportunities. I remember being at a conference 2 years ago, which was hosted by Ashton Kutcher. And he was up on stage and he was doing his intro, and everybody expected him just to do an intro because that's what he was there to do. What actually happened was he picked somebody out of the crowd. He said, look, I want to talk to somebody. Raise your hand if you have a business, and I'll have a chat with you. So everybody raised their hands. There was a lady who was particularly enthusiastic. And so he picked her. She came onto the stage and he asked her, what's your business? And she couldn't explain in a few sentences, in a few seconds, what her business was. She was clearly passionate about it, but she wasn't able to get the audience to understand what she was. And then when he said, what do you need? So what's the next thing you need for your business to be more successful? She couldn't tell him that. And it's not because she didn't know, it's because she hadn't practiced. It's because she hadn't simplified it down to a couple of sentences that she's ready to pull out at any given moment. And so he then said, I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. Always be ready. And if you are, then an opportunity like this can come along and you can get some really tangible help from it, something that's really going to support you moving forward. And so he went back into the crowd, asked exactly the same question. Young man put his hand up. He got him to come onto the stage and he said, what do you do? What's next for you? And the guy told him literally in 30 seconds who he was, who he did it for, and what key thing that he needed next. So he knew that what he needed next was a tech developer. And at that point, Ashton said, here's £30,000, go ahead and get yourself a tech developer and make your business fly. And it just shows you don't know when the next opportunity is going to come your way, but it will. Like, that's the one thing that you can be certain of. It will definitely come. You have to be ready for it. I think that's absolutely brilliant. It's a wonderful point to end on. And I think for those wanting to look at some elevator pitches, there's a brilliant Instagram that handles that entrepreneur. And they've got lots of elevator pitches, 1-minute Instagram videos with various entrepreneurs. So you can have an idea of what a really good one looks like. Janice, this was incredible, so insightful. Dean Lesser saying we all need an Ashton. I think that's true. I think it's really insightful. We had a really active participation from the audience, so thank you so much for asking your questions. They're really well considered, and I think what we've come to the kind of conclusion of is that you can achieve it if you believe it. The kind of the cringy adage, but it's so true that if you put it into the world, if you look at the challenges as opportunities to move forward, great things can happen. So thank you so much. I'm just sharing all your details about where to find Eating with Elephants, or more about Janice in the chat box. So do have a look, do follow Janice and see what she's up to. We really hope that we can work together again in EntFest 2021, fingers crossed, and sort of bring some of this amazing entrepreneurship to the floor. So thank you so much, and thank you everyone for joining.